What is up, guys? Delboy here, bringing you a prediction video, or preview video at least, for James Degale versus Caleb Truax for rematch. I'm not going to talk about the Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker fight. It was a bank holiday here in the UK. I just didn't have time to get to it, to be completely honest with you. And not only that, I feel a bit under the weather, to say the least. But James Degale versus Caleb Truax 2. To me, it's an interesting fight, and it all basically boils down to what James Degale has left. To me, I've been speculating for a little while now. Before the Caleb Truax first fight, I've been asking how much James Degale has in the tank. Now, he's only had 26 fights, but if you've been watching James Degale from the beginning, you would realise he's had a lot of tough outings. He's been travelling on the road, taking tough fights, and he's taken a lot of punishment in these fights. We can go back to early on in his career where he and George Groves jumped into a big fight straight away. Big fight, takes his toll on the body, mentally, physically. All these things take their toll. So he loses to George Groves. In his very next fight, he fought a guy called Peter Wilczewski, and that is a European title fight right after the George Groves fight. And that fight was so hard for James Degale. He got hurt in that fight. He got hit with a lot of shots. And it was a life and death type fight. That was a fight after George Groves. After that, he had his spell on Channel 5. And although he was winning these fights quite clearly, it was during this stage of his career he was injured. I believe he had a knee injury maybe? And he was winning these fights, but he was taking a lot of punishment against sea-level guys. The likes of Hadil Mohammadi, Stefan Bozic, Dyer Davis, guys like that. He was taking licks in those fights. All of this adds up. He was suffering a lot of injuries at that time. He then signs with Eddie Hearn. He looks good against Brandon Gonzalez and Marco Antonio Paraban. After that, he has five hard fights in a row. He fought Andre Durrell, started extremely well in that fight, but as that fight wore on, he was taking more and more punishment. The Rodrigo Molina fight, or Porky Medina, as he's also called, was an extremely tough fight. Lucien Butte landed some good hard shots on James Degale. To me, the Badou Jack fight took a hell of a lot out of James Degale. I felt James Degale clearly lost that fight against Badou Jack. And after Badou Jack, he fought Caleb Truax, where he got beaten up. He's had a long, hard career. He's had a lot of tough fights. And James Degale, regardless of what people say, is not a good defensive fighter. He's shipped punishment throughout his career, and it's starting to take a toll, in my opinion. To me, he's not the same guy he once was. And that's been evident in his last few fights. This fight's really intriguing. I mean, we all know what James Degale has to do to win. He needs to be more light on his feet. He needs to be more active with that jab, because that is something James Degale hasn't done in recent years, is being active with a jab. He's never been a good jabber, to be honest with you, but he's not been active enough with that jab, especially as of late. He needs to be more active with that. He needs to try and stay off the ropes as much as possible, because when he was on the ropes against Caleb Truax in the first fight, he was getting worked over. He was getting worked to the body, particularly the uppercut to the body, and he was just getting swarmed on the ropes, and he was getting outworked, and he took some big shots on the ropes as well. So to me, James needs to be more active with his jab. He needs to stay off the ropes. He needs to be using his feet, and he needs to be using his angles and his unorthodox style, because James Degale is tricky at times. A lot of people call James Degale slick. I've never ever agreed with that. Like I said, he's defensively quite vulnerable, but what James Degale is sometimes, he is awkward at times. He does switch stances. He changes levels. He's got an awkward punch technique that surprises people sometimes. Can catch them kind of like cold, as we saw against Badou Jack in the first round where he drops him, as we saw against Andre Durrell. James Degale needs to come out with something quick time in this fight. He needs to put it on Caleb Truax right away to try and build up a bit of a lead, to try and let Caleb Truax know that he's not there to make up the numbers. And it's going to be a lot tougher fight than it was first time around, because I felt Caleb Truax won clearly first time around. Felt it was a one-sided fight. So to me, Degale, like I said, needs to stay off the ropes. He needs to be using his feet, needs to be active with that jab, and he needs to have success early. He needs to land early, and he needs to, make like I said, make Truax know that he's in for a fight. And also, like I said, he needs to move more, but he does need to manage his stamina better, because I felt against Badou Jack he clearly gassed at the end of that fight. I felt he gassed against Caleb Truax. I felt he gassed against Rodrigo Medina. I felt he gassed against Andre Degale. You know, this is becoming a pattern, especially in recent years. You know, James Degale doesn't close out fights well. So, and it's not like James Degale doesn't train hard. We all know he does. We all know Jim McDonnell he takes sort of strength and conditioning really seriously. So I don't know why James Degale gasses like he does, but he needs to be conserving his stamina a lot better in this fight. He needs to be picking his spots, and he needs to be moving and turning Caleb Truax, because Caleb Truax is a guy who, he's a good honest boxer, he's a good honest fighter, but he ain't nothing special. I mean, I recall seeing this guy getting beaten up and stopped late by Daniel Jacobs. Anthony Dirrell blasted this guy out of there. You know, Caleb Truax drew with Ozzy Duran, who's a journeyman. I remember Jermaine Taylor beating Caleb Truax. That was an old Jermaine Taylor. So Truax is very beatable. He's a tough guy. He comes to fight. You know, he brings a lot of work rate and a lot of aggression, but he's really, really limited. Anybody who is in the upper echelon should beat him, and they have done so far throughout his career. So to me, like, if James Degale has something left, he should beat Caleb Truax. But I just question what he has left. You know, to me, the pressure of Caleb Truax was really taking its toll first time around. There was a moment in the mid-rounds, I forgot what round it was, where Degale was really hurt on the ropes. And it looked like at one stage James Degale was in serious trouble. You know, the uppercut to the body was really, really paying dividends for Caleb Truax. Just the sheer aggression was giving James Degale all kinds of trouble. And this time around, if we're talking about Caleb Truax's game plan, I think he needs to do the exact same thing. He needs to walk down James Degale. He needs to be quite, you know, he needs to be cute about it. He needs to use a high guard, try not to give too much away. But when you have him on the ropes, just let your hands go, because James Degale, he can fight off the ropes. We've seen it before, but there are times on the ropes where he just doesn't throw back, and he can just get outworked and overwhelmed. We saw that against Medina. We saw that against Caleb Truax in the first fight. Volume has always been a big issue to James Degale. Aggression has always been a big issue to James Degale. Also, a good jab has also been a big issue to James Degale. I felt Truax's jab in the first fight was quite a successful shot for him. He needs to be doing that again. When he's walking James down, just don't come through with silly hooks, or, you know, don't throw lead right hands or whatever. You do that sometimes, but like, you will jab your way in, because James has never been good at avoiding jabs. We can go back to the first George Groves fight, for example. You know, a good jab does give James Degale a lot of issues. Go back to the Badou Jack fight, the Andre Degale fight especially. You know, to me, Caleb Truax just needs to do what he did first time around. Replicate the same game plan, bring pressure, bring aggression, work the body, try and pin back Degale on the ropes or in the corners, and try and reduce his output and wear him out, basically. To me, it's not a big secret what Caleb Truax has to do. He needs to do the exact same thing. He needs to put it on James Degale and really make him suffer. But I find this one hard to call, because was that fight a one-off? I don't think it was, looking at James Degale's career throughout. Even before the Badou Jack fight, there's always been fights where James Degale has kind of switched off, fights where he should win on paper quite easily. Like I said, the guy after George Groves, the Polish fella, you know, nobody expected that fight to be so tough, but it was. Nobody expected Caleb Truax to beat James Degale, but he did. A lot of people felt Medina beat James Degale. You know, the Butte fight was close, and that was an old Butte. It was close. So, listen, man, I mean, I think this is going to be an extremely tough fight for James Degale. I've seen a lot of people say that James is going to right the wrongs and make easy work of Caleb Truax. From what I've seen in recent years, from what I've seen from James Degale as a whole, I've got no confidence that is going to happen. I think this fight is going to be extremely tough. I think James Degale is going to have issues keeping Caleb Truax off of him, and it's going to be a close fight. I expect a better James Degale because he's coming with his back against the wall, and that's the first time he's kind of been like that for a while now. He's been the champion for his last few fights, and last time he had his back up against the wall, he actually did kind of produce against Andre Dirrell. So hopefully we get a good James Degale, and it makes for a really competitive fight. I could see it being a good fight, and I'm actually going to sit on the fence here. Am I going to sit on the fence? I'm probably favouring Caleb Truax. I just can't trust James Degale. I think, like I said, firstly, James Degale to me is past his best at this point. But not only that, I think we have been guilty of overrating James Degale. I've never overrated his defence. I've always been saying his defence is overrated. But I probably have overrated James Degale as a fighter in general. You know, he's not a guy who makes easy work of fights that he should do. That's just looking at his career, you know. That's just it is what it is. But I can't see why people think this is going to be an easy rematch. I really don't see why they think that. You know, Caleb Truax, if he wins this fight, you know, he's got some big money fights on the horizon, and we're talking about a guy in Truax who hasn't really earned that much money from boxing. He can change his life with a win here. The first time was great for him. You know, he got the belt and he's got a decent money defence straight away against Degale in the rematch. But if he beats Degale, he then can go into unification fights for life-changing money. That's a lot of incentive for somebody like Caleb Truax. And that is incentive that maybe James Degale can't match. You know, James Degale saying he says that he's got a couple of million in the bank. Does he have that same intensity that he once had? Does he have the same hunger as Caleb Truax, who a guy, a lot of people don't view him as on the same level in terms of skill, but you know, if that skill doesn't match the intensity and the desire, then James Degale's going to be in a lot of trouble. I'm going to go with a Caleb Truax win here. I think he's going to retire James Degale. What do you guys think? Peace.